The shepherd girl said to the Apache man, "You've seen me undressed. Now you must marry me." Leela was a young shepherd girl who lived in a small village surrounded by green hills and flowing streams. Every morning, before the sun rose, she would wake up and take her flock of sheep to the open fields. She loved the quiet of the hills, the sound of the wind moving through the grass, and the way the sunlight touched the trees. For Lila, these early hours were peaceful, and she felt free in a way she could never feel in the village, where rules and expectations followed her everywhere. Lila was not like the other girls in her village. She was brave, curious, and sometimes a little stubborn. While other girls stayed close to their families, Lila liked exploring the hills, learning the paths the shepherds had walked for years, and discovering hidden streams and meadows where no one else went. She loved her flock, but she also loved the hills themselves. They were like her friends, always quiet, always honest, always open. She felt a deep connection to nature, a connection that made her strong and confident in her own way. One warm afternoon, Lila decided to take a break from watching her sheep. She had found a small, hidden stream that trickled down through the rocks, creating a clear pool where the water was cool and refreshing. The place was surrounded by trees, their branches forming a natural roof, and moss covered the rocks in a soft green blanket. Lila loved this place. It felt safe, private, and perfect for a quiet rest. She set her bag down, untied her shoes, and dipped her feet into the water. The coldness made her gasp slightly, but it was a pleasant shock to her skin. She laughed softly, a sound that echoed gently among the trees. Lila had been walking and playing with her sheep for hours, and now she felt tired. She decided to wash herself and enjoy the water. She let the clear stream run over her arms and legs, feeling the warm sun on her back. The birds were singing above her, and the gentle rustling of the leaves made her feel calm and happy. What Lila did not know was that someone else was nearby. Dakota, an Apache man traveling through the hills, had chosen the same area to rest. He was a strong man, careful and thoughtful, and he respected nature more than anything. Dakota had been walking for hours, following a small trail, and when he saw the stream, he thought it would be a perfect place to rest and drink water. He did not notice Lila at first, because she was hidden behind a large rock. Lila, thinking she was alone, did not see Dakota either. She continued to wash herself, enjoying the cool water and the soft sunlight on her skin. The sheep wandered nearby, grazing quietly, not realizing the tension that was about to occur. It was one of those rare moments when the world felt perfectly still and quiet, as if nothing could disturb it. Suddenly, Dakota turned a corner and froze. He had not expected to see anyone. And there, in the clear water, was a young girl, her hair wet and clinging to her shoulders, the sunlight shining on her face. He quickly looked away, realizing he had accidentally seen something he should not have. Dakota was embarrassed and felt a mix of surprise and respect. He did not move or make a sound. He simply stepped back behind the rocks, giving Lila the privacy she deserved. Lila, feeling a sudden change in the air, looked up. At first she thought it might have been an animal or a bird, but then she noticed a shadow moving behind the rocks. She realized someone had seen her. Her heart began to race. She was not afraid of Dakota, but she understood what this meant. In her village, appearances mattered. Respect, honor, and proper behavior were important, especially for girls. She quickly wrapped herself in a cloth and stepped out of the water, her face flushed with embarrassment. Dakota stepped out slowly as well, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I am sorry," he said softly. "I did not mean to intrude. I was just walking through and did not see you." His voice was calm, respectful, and sincere. Lila studied him for a moment. She could see the honesty in his eyes. He was not a cruel man, and he had not come to harm her. But she also knew that this accident could not be ignored. In her heart, she knew that something had changed. The rules of her community were clear. An accident like this, even if unintended, could not simply be forgotten. Taking a deep breath, Lila decided to speak. She was careful with her words, choosing each one like a piece of a puzzle. "You have seen me," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering of her heart. "And in our way, this means something. It cannot be ignored." Dakota listened, understanding slowly. He had been raised with his own code of respect and honor, and he realized that this girl was not angry or upset, but serious. He nodded. "I understand," he said. "I will respect what is right. I do not wish to cause trouble or dishonor you." Lila felt a mix of relief and determination. She knew that the days ahead would be complicated. This encounter could not be erased, and it would influence their relationship, whether they liked it or not. She also realized that she had a choice, to let fear control her or to act with courage. Lila was never a girl to let fear guide her decisions. The sheep, unaware of the tension, continued grazing. Leela began to guide them slowly back toward the village, Dakota following at a respectful distance. They did not speak much at first. Words were not needed to understand the seriousness of the moment. Each step was careful, measured, as they walked through the hills that had once been a place of solitude and now carried the weight of unexpected responsibility. As they approached a clearing, Lila finally spoke again. "You must understand," she said, "that in my village what has happened cannot be ignored. I am not angry, but things must be done the right way." Dakota nodded once more. "I understand," he replied. "I will act with honor as you wish." His words were simple, but Lila felt their weight. He was not afraid. He was ready to face whatever came next, just as she was. By the time they reached the edge of the village, the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was warm with the last light of the day. Lila felt a strange combination of fear, curiosity, and excitement. The world had shifted in a single afternoon. Something new had begun, and neither of them could turn back. That evening, as Lila returned home, she thought about the stream, the hills, and the unexpected meeting. She realized that life sometimes moved in ways that could not be planned. She had always believed in courage, honesty, and respect, but now she had to act on these principles in a way she had never imagined. The world was larger than the village, larger than her flock, larger than even the hills themselves. And in this larger world, she and Dakota had been connected by a single, unexpected moment. Lila knew that the story of the stream and the accidental encounter would follow her. It would be a test of her bravery, her intelligence, and her understanding of honor. She also knew that Dakota was not a man to shy away from challenges. Somehow, she felt that they would find a way to navigate the rules, the expectations, and the feelings that had begun to grow between them. For now, though, Lila went to sleep that night thinking of the quiet hills, the flowing stream, and the man who had accidentally seen her. She felt a mix of nerves and hope. The world was changing, and she was ready to meet it with courage. She would face the challenges ahead with her head held high, knowing that the hills, the sheep, and her own strong heart would guide her through whatever came next. The next morning, Lila woke up before the sun, just as she always did, but now there was a new thought in her mind. She would have to face Dakota again, speak with him, and make choices that mattered. She was no longer just a girl tending her sheep. She was someone who had met the unexpected, who had been seen in a way that mattered, and who now had to act with courage and wisdom. And so, with her sheep following her through the hills, Lila began the day with determination. The hills were the same, the stream was the same, but everything had changed. A new story had begun, one that she and Dakota would write together, step by step, word by word, choice by choice. After the encounter at the stream, Lila could not stop thinking about Dakota. The memory of him, standing respectfully behind the rocks, lingered in her mind. She knew that their meeting had changed things. Life in the village, which had once been simple and predictable, suddenly felt uncertain. She felt a strange mix of curiosity, nervousness, and determination. Lila knew she had to face the situation carefully because both her reputation and her feelings were now involved. For the next few days, Lila continued her routine of taking the sheep to the hills. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering back to Dakota. She wondered what he thought of her. Did he feel awkward, angry, or confused? Or did he understand, as she did, that this was an accident, but one that mattered? Every time she walked past the stream, she glanced at the rocks where he had stood, imagining him there, watching the water flow around her. Dakota, too, could not forget the girl from the stream. He thought about her often, about her courage and the way she had spoken to him directly. He admired her honesty and strength, qualities that were rare and valuable. He respected her greatly, and he knew that he had to act carefully. In his culture, as in hers, respect and honor were very important. Seeing her had created a situation that required careful thought. He wanted to do the right thing, but he also could not ignore the feelings that had begun to grow inside him. Days passed, and their paths crossed again by chance. Lila had been tending her flock near the edge of the woods when she noticed a shadow moving through the trees. She held her breath for a moment, unsure if it was Dakota or just a traveler passing through. As the figure drew closer, she realized it was him. Her heart skipped a beat, but she kept her head high. She would not show fear or shame. Dakota approached slowly, keeping his hands visible and his expression calm. "Good morning, Lila," he said softly. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "You are not disturbing me?" Lila replied, her voice steady, though she felt a little nervous inside. "I have been thinking about what happened at the stream." "So have I," Dakota said, nodding. It was an unexpected meeting. I did not mean to intrude. I am sorry for that. Lila studied him carefully. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. She knew he meant every word. I know, she said, and I am not angry. But we both know that things have changed. We cannot pretend that nothing happened. Dakota nodded again. And I want to do what is right. His voice was calm, but Lila could sense the care in every word. They walked together for a while, keeping a careful distance at first. The sheep followed Lila quietly, grazing as they moved. The hills seemed peaceful, but both of them felt the weight of what had occurred. They did not speak much at first. Words were not needed to understand the seriousness of the situation. Each knew that the other understood the importance of respect, honor, and careful action. After a while, Lila spoke again. In our village, reputation is important, she said. Even accidents must be acknowledged. People will talk, and they will expect something to be done. I know, Dakota replied. In my culture, respect and honor are also very important. I want to make sure I act in the right way. They walked in silence for a few moments, listening to the soft rustling of the leaves and the distant sound of the stream. The world seemed quiet and calm, but both felt the tension growing between them. It was not anger or fear, but a mixture of curiosity, responsibility, and the first hints of something deeper. Over the next week, they continued to meet occasionally, always carefully and respectfully. Sometimes it was by chance when Dakota passed near the hills or the village. Sometimes it was deliberate, but both made sure to keep distance and show respect. They began to talk more, sharing small stories about their lives, their families, and their experiences. Lila learned about Dakota's travels, the challenges he had faced, and the values he lived by. Dakota learned about Lila's life in the village, her love for the hills, and her dedication to her flock. Through these conversations, they began to understand each other better. They realized that despite coming from different worlds, they shared many values. Both cared deeply about respect, honesty, and doing what was right. Both valued courage, kindness, and integrity. This understanding made their connection stronger. It was no longer just about the accident at the stream. It was about mutual respect and growing trust. But with understanding came tension. Lila knew that villagers were already beginning to notice her unusual behavior, walking farther into the hills, spending time alone, and sometimes speaking in a serious tone when talking to Dakota. She worried about what people would say. She did not want to cause gossip or shame, but she also could not ignore the reality of her situation. Dakota faced similar challenges. While he respected his own community's rules and customs, he could not deny the feelings that were beginning to grow in his heart. He admired Lila's courage, her honesty, and her strong spirit. He wanted to act correctly, but he also knew that waiting too long could complicate matters. The more they met and talked, the more he realized that their connection was something rare and valuable. One afternoon, they found themselves alone near the stream again. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow on the water. The sheep were grazing nearby, and the world seemed calm. Lila turned to Dakota, her expression serious but not angry. "We cannot ignore this anymore," she said. "People will expect something to happen, and we must decide how to face it together." Dakota nodded slowly. "I agree," he said. "But I want to do it in a way that honors both our communities and ourselves. I do not want anyone to be hurt." Lila smiled slightly. "Then we will be careful. But we must also be brave. The right thing is not always easy, but it is always worth doing." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about what might come next. They considered the expectations of their families, the rules of their communities, and the feelings in their own hearts. It was not easy. They knew that some people would not understand, that some would judge, and that both would have to act with courage. But they also knew that their connection was genuine, built on respect, honesty, and shared values. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hills, Lila and Dakota walked back toward the village together. They did not speak much, but each felt a growing sense of understanding. They knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The accident at the stream had brought them together, but it was their honesty, courage, and respect that would guide them forward. Over the next few weeks, they continued to meet in secret, always carefully and respectfully. They talked, learned from each other, and began to trust one another completely. Lila found that she could speak openly with Dakota about her fears, hopes, and dreams. Dakota found that he could share his own experiences, thoughts, and feelings without fear of judgment. This growing trust made their bond stronger and more meaningful. Yet they both knew the tension had not disappeared. The accident at the stream would always be remembered, and both would have to make decisions about how to face their communities. Lila sometimes felt anxious, wondering how the villagers would react. Dakota sometimes wondered how his own people would respond, but through it all, they relied on each other for support and guidance. By the end of the part, it was clear that something important had begun. The relationship between Lila and Dakota had moved beyond the accident. It was now about understanding, respect, and a connection that neither could ignore. Both knew that challenges awaited them, but they also knew that their courage and honesty would help them face whatever came next. The hills, the stream, and the quiet afternoons became their sanctuary, a place where they could think, talk, and prepare for the difficult decisions ahead. The sheep wandered nearby, unaware of the growing bond between the two humans. And as the sun set each day, Lila and Dakota returned home, hearts full of hope, courage, and determination. The story was no longer just about an accident. It was about choices, responsibility, and the beginnings of a connection that could change both their lives forever. They were learning that respect, honesty, and courage were more important than fear, and that facing the challenges together made them stronger. Days turned into weeks, and Lila and Dakota's connection grew stronger, but so did the weight of their situation. The memory of the stream and their first encounter never left them, and now both knew they could not avoid what had happened. Life in the hills was no longer only about tending sheep or walking through quiet forests. Every step they took reminded them of the responsibility they carried, responsibility to each other, their families, and the expectations of their communities. Lila began to notice the whispers in the village. Some of the women watched her closely, curious about her long walks and the serious expression that sometimes appeared on her face. Children would point and ask questions, sensing something unusual. Lila tried to ignore it, focusing on her flock, but she could not escape the feeling that eyes were always upon her. The villagers respected her for her courage and independence, but everyone knew that the encounter at the stream would be remembered. In their world, honor and reputation were woven into daily life, and even an accident could carry consequences. Dakota faced similar pressures. He had returned to his people after the meeting at the stream, and though he did not speak of it directly, he could feel their eyes upon him. He was a man of honor, known for his strength, intelligence, and respect for traditions. Seeing Lila had created a situation that required careful consideration. He wanted to act correctly, but he also felt an unfamiliar pull in his heart. He admired Lila's courage, her honesty, and the way she carried herself. The more he thought about her, the more he realized that his feelings were growing, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect and admiration. One afternoon, Lila decided that waiting any longer was no longer an option. She could feel the tension rising inside her, a mix of curiosity, fear, and courage. She had been careful, polite, and respectful in all her interactions with Dakota, but now she knew that they needed to confront the reality of their situation. She could not pretend that the stream incident was just a coincidence or a small mistake. Something had changed, and both of them had to face it directly. She walked to the edge of the hills, where the sunlight touched the trees and the stream glimmered softly. Dakota was already there, waiting at a respectful distance. The moment was quiet, but the air seemed charged with anticipation. Lila took a deep breath and spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We must talk," she said. "We cannot continue as if nothing has happened. This moment at the stream changes everything." Dakota nodded slowly. "I have been thinking about it," he said softly. "Every day I think about what is right. I do not want to cause dishonor or hurt anyone. But I also cannot ignore what has happened." Lila's eyes met his. She could see the honesty and care in his expression. She felt a strange mix of relief and determination. "Then we must be honest with each other," she said. "We cannot hide our thoughts or our feelings. It is not fair to ourselves or to those around us." They sat together near the stream, the water flowing gently beside them. They spoke for hours, carefully choosing words, explaining their feelings, and acknowledging the reality of the situation. Whoa. Lila told Dakota about her fears, her worries about the village, and her sense of responsibility. Dakota spoke of his own thoughts, the values he lived by, and the respect he felt for her. Each word strengthened their understanding and trust. As the conversation deepened, they began to confront what had always been unspoken, the connection between them. Lila realized that she respected Dakota not just because of the accident, but because of who he was, honest, careful, and courageous. Dakota realized that he admired Lila not only for her beauty, but for her courage, intelligence, and strength of character. Both felt a growing certainty that their meeting was no longer just an accident. It was the beginning of something meaningful. But understanding also brought tension. Lila knew that the villagers would expect her to act according to tradition. She could not ignore what was expected of her, and she could not ask Dakota to disregard his own community's rules. At the same time, Dakota understood that he had to respect Lila's world while also staying true to himself. Both knew that this situation required careful thought, courage, and honesty. One evening, as the sun began to set and painted the hills in gold and pink, Lila made a decision. She would speak plainly, as she always had, and she would not let fear control her. She stood near the stream, the soft water reflecting the colors of the sky, and looked at Dakota. "I will not hide," she said. "I am not angry and I do not blame you, but we must face what this moment means. We must make a choice, one that is honest, respectful, and brave." Dakota looked at her, his eyes steady and sincere. "I agree," he said. "We must act in a way that honors both our communities and ourselves. I want to do what is right, but I also want to follow my heart. I cannot ignore how I feel." For a long moment they were silent, listening to the stream and the distant sounds of the hills. Then Lila spoke again. "The right thing is not always the easy thing. Sometimes it is difficult, and sometimes it is frightening. But if we act with honesty and courage, we can face anything together." Dakota nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "Then we will face it," he said. "Together." This moment became a turning point for both of them. They realized that they could no longer wait for circumstances to guide them. They had to make decisions, take responsibility, and act with bravery. The connection between them was no longer just about the accident at the stream. It was about mutual respect, understanding, and the beginning of trust that could grow into something more. Over the following days, they prepared for what would come next. They thought about how to speak to their families, how to honor their communities, and how to act with respect and care. Lila shared her thoughts with her older sister, who was wise and understanding. Her sister listened carefully and gave advice, reminding Lila to act with honesty and patience. Dakota spoke with his elders, seeking guidance while also remaining true to his feelings. Both knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but they also knew that honesty, courage, and respect would guide them. During this time, they continued to meet quietly in the hills, near the stream, and along hidden paths where the sheep grazed. They shared stories, laughed softly, and began to plan how they could move forward. Each meeting strengthened their bond. They began to understand that the connection between them was not temporary or accidental. It was meaningful, built on shared values and trust. Despite the challenges, there were moments of joy and calm. They would watch the sunset together, the hills glowing in gold and pink, and talk about dreams, hopes, and possibilities. Lila showed Dakota her favorite spots in the hills, the small caves, the hidden meadows, and the places where wildflowers grew. Dakota shared stories of his travels, teaching Lila about the ways of his people and the lessons he had learned. These moments deepened their connection, making it clear that their bond was more than just an obligation. It was a true friendship that could grow into love. But even as they grew closer, the reality of their situation remained. They both understood that they would face scrutiny, questions, and expectations. People would notice their meetings, and the story of the stream would follow them. They had to be brave, thoughtful, and honest in every step they took. Lila and Dakota realized that courage was not just about physical bravery. It was about honesty, responsibility, and standing by one's principles, even when it was difficult. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky, Lila spoke quietly. "We cannot hide anymore," she said. "We must speak clearly, with courage, and make decisions that are honest and right. Waiting will only make things harder." Dakota took her hand gently, showing respect and care. "I understand," he said. "We will face it together with courage. We will do what is right, not only for ourselves, but for our families and communities." That night, as they parted and returned to their separate homes, both felt a mix of nervousness and determination. They knew that the next steps would be challenging, but they also felt a deep sense of purpose. The connection between them had grown stronger, built on understanding, respect, and the courage to act honestly. The accident at the stream had led to this turning point, a moment where both had to face reality, confront their feelings, and make decisions that would shape their futures. By the end of this period, both Lila and Dakota understood the truth. The situation at the stream had changed everything. They could not go back to the way things were before. Their connection was real, meaningful, and filled with responsibility. It required courage, honesty, and careful thought, and both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, guided by respect, integrity, and a growing trust that could not be ignored. The hills, the streams, and the quiet forests remained their refuge, but the story was no longer just about solitude or daily routines. It was about choices, responsibility, and the first steps toward a connection that could change both their lives forever. Lila and Dakota were no longer just a shepherd girl and a traveler. They were two people bound by respect, honesty, and the courage to face the unexpected. The days grew warmer as spring moved into early summer, and the hills around Lila's village were alive with color. Wildflowers bloomed in bright patches, bees buzzed lazily from blossom to blossom, and the gentle wind carried the soft scent of grass and earth. The hills had always been Lila's favorite place, but now they felt different, full of meaning, responsibility, and expectation. Every time she walked among the streams and meadows, she thought of Dakota, their conversations, and the difficult decisions they had to make. Lila knew that time was passing, and the longer they delayed, the harder it would be to face the reality of their situation. The story of the stream, though still quiet, had begun to spread slowly in the village. People had noticed Lila's seriousness, her long walks, and her quiet moments near the hills. Some whispered, others speculated, but all were waiting for something to happen. In Lila's world, honor and respect were everything, and a girl's actions were watched closely. She could not ignore the expectations, no matter how much she wished she could. Dakota, too, felt the pressure. He had spent time thinking about what he should do and what was expected of him. He had always been a careful, thoughtful man, but this situation was unlike anything he had ever faced. It was not simply a matter of tradition or rules. It was about respect, responsibility, and honesty. And now, as he walked through the hills toward the meeting place they had chosen, he felt a mix of determination and nervousness. He knew the next steps would be important, perhaps the most important steps of his life. They met at the stream in the late afternoon, when the sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the hills. The water flowed gently over smooth rocks, sparkling in the golden light. The place seemed peaceful, but both Lila and Dakota felt the weight of the moment. They did not speak immediately. They simply stood, facing each other, aware that this conversation could change everything. Lila took a deep breath. "We cannot wait any longer," she said. "We have thought, we have spoken, and we have considered, but now we must act. We must decide what is right and face it with courage." Dakota nodded. "I have been thinking about this every day," he said. "I want to do what is right. I want to act with honor, but I also want to follow my heart. I cannot ignore my feelings any longer." They sat near the water, watching the sheep graze in the distance, and began a long, honest conversation. They spoke about their fears, their hopes, and their responsibilities. Lila explained the expectations of her village, the importance of reputation, and the way her community would view what had happened at the stream. Dakota explained the rules and traditions of his own people, the importance of honor, and the careful decisions he had to make. As the conversation continued, the tension grew. Both understood the difficulty of the situation. They knew that this was no longer just about them. It was about the expectations of families, the rules of communities, and the responsibilities that came with honor. Every word carried weight. Every decision mattered. But through the tension, there was also a growing sense of clarity. They realized that honesty and courage would guide them, even when fear tried to take over. Finally, Lila spoke with quiet determination. "I am ready," she said. "I do not want to hide, and I do not want to be afraid. I respect my community, and I respect you. But I cannot ignore what has happened or what I feel. We must face this together, honestly and bravely." Dakota looked at her, seeing the courage and honesty in her eyes. He felt the weight of responsibility, but he also felt certainty. "Then we will face it," he said. "Together. We will do what is right, and we will not let fear guide us." They rose from the ground and began walking slowly toward the edge of the hills. Their steps were careful, measured, as if each one carried the weight of the future. They knew that the next moments would be decisive, and that their choices would affect not only themselves but also those around them. Lila's heart beat faster, but she did not falter. She had always been brave, and now courage was more important than ever. As they approached the village, the first villagers began to notice them. Some were tending fields, others were walking along the paths, and all sensed something important in the way Lila and Dakota moved. They spoke quietly among themselves, observing the calm but serious expressions on both faces. Lila and Dakota understood that they could no longer remain hidden. The moment had arrived to act with honesty and courage. When they reached the center of the village, Lila's parents were waiting. They had heard rumors, but they did not know the full story. Lila's mother, a wise and thoughtful woman, stepped forward first. "Lila," she said softly, "we know something has happened. Tell us what is true." Lila nodded. She took a deep breath and spoke with calm honesty. She told her parents about the stream, the accident, and the way Dakota had seen her. She spoke of the respect he had shown, the care in his actions, and the conversations they had shared since that day. She explained her feelings, her worries, and her determination to act with honesty. Her parents listened quietly, without interrupting. When she finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then her father spoke. "Lila, you have shown courage and honesty," he said. "These are values that matter more than gossip or fear. You have acted with respect, and you have considered the responsibilities of both your community and yourself. We will honor your decision." Dakota's elders had also gathered nearby, watching the scene carefully. Oda spoke next, explaining his side of the story. He described his respect for Lila, the honesty of their conversations, and his own sense of responsibility. He emphasized that he wanted to act with honor, to respect both communities, and to do what was right. His words were sincere, measured, and full of integrity. The villagers and elders listened attentively. There were whispers, but there was also understanding. People could see the honesty and respect in both Lila and Dakota. They could see that this was not a reckless decision or an impulsive choice. It was a thoughtful, brave, and honorable response to a situation that could have caused shame or scandal. After hours of discussion, guidance, and careful thought, a decision was reached. Lila and Dakota would be formally joined in a way that honored both communities. It was not a simple decision, and it required compromise, patience, and understanding. But everyone involved could see that this was the right choice. It was not forced or dishonorable. It was a union built on respect, honesty, and courage. The day of the ceremony arrived. The village was decorated with flowers and simple decorations, and the hills around them were alive with birdsong and sunlight. Families from both communities gathered, watching with quiet anticipation. Lila wore a simple dress, her hair braided neatly, and she walked with calm confidence. Dakota wore the traditional attire of his people, strong and dignified. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Elders spoke words of blessing, emphasizing the importance of respect, honesty, and integrity. Lila and Dakota spoke their own words, promising to honor each other, to act with courage, and to face challenges together. The villagers watched quietly, some with smiles, some with thoughtful expressions, but all understood the significance of the moment. When the ceremony ended, Lila and Dakota stepped forward together. They held hands, looked at each other, and smiled. It was a smile of relief, courage, and hope. They had faced the most difficult moment of their journey, the point where fear, responsibility, and expectation met, and they had acted with honesty, respect, and bravery. The villagers slowly began to applaud, recognizing the courage of both Lila and Dakota. The sheep wandered nearby, grazing quietly as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. The hills, the stream, and the quiet paths had witnessed a moment of honesty, integrity, and human courage that would be remembered for years to come. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold, Lila and Dakota walked together through the hills. They knew the days ahead would not always be easy, but they also knew that they could face anything as long as they acted with respect, honesty, and courage. Their bond had grown stronger, and the challenges they had faced had only made it deeper. The world around them was the same. The hills, the streams, and the trees. But the meaning of the world had changed. They had faced fear, expectation, and responsibility, and had emerged with clarity and trust. They had proven that courage, honesty, and integrity could guide them even through the most difficult moments. And so, as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Lila and Dakota sat together by the stream. They listened to the water, the wind, and the quiet sounds of the hills. They did not speak much, for words were not needed. They simply held hands, knowing that they had faced the turning point of their journey and emerged stronger, united, and ready for whatever life would bring next.